wanted to introduce Pat. I got all nervous. I was scared. I actually said no. I can't believe I was back to my old behavior. And then I thought about it, and I was like, what did I just do? Even though I'm sober over 5 years, it's so easy to go back into that old behavior. But it is such an honor to be able to introduce Pat. See, I thought I couldn't do it, but this isn't about me. This is about Pat. She's been a dear friend for me for the past 5 years. We met at the Home Group. When I came around in New Jersey, I felt safe there because I was still living in New York. And then I felt safe to come to meetings. And she was one of the first people I met over there. And she was always kind and considerate, and do you need anything? And whenever we went over the house, and she was always so hospitable. And I really didn't deserve all that, but she was always there for me. And she's never too busy to help other women that she's associated with, anybody, whether it's at work or in the program or anybody that just needs help. She's always been there for me and everyone else that I know. And even for people that I don't know or people that I know through other people, she's always been there. She's just a dear, sweet person, and her home group is the Lebanon Big Book Group of New Jersey. And it is my pleasure to introduce Miss Pat R.
Hi, my name is Pat, and I'm an alcoholic. And for the grace of God and the fellowship of this program, I've been sober since August 28, 1970, and for that I'll be forever grateful. I want to thank Marianne and Dave. She talked about us and what we've done, but they're always there. If you call Dave or Marianne for anything, and they're always together. I'm not a computer person. I hate computers. I hate to stand up here and say I'm probably computer illiterate. I can email. That's about all I can do. And, Dave bailed me out many times with that computer, but they're always willing to come and do whatever you need done. And the committee, we want to thank them. I hope that this is a very successful year for you as far as your conference goes, and that it'll grow and mature as the years go on. These are great ways to get together and just kind of regenerate yourself. That's what I find. And what else do I? A couple of disclaimers. First of all, the husband I talk about from the podium is not that one, okay? All right? So when you hear all the negative, I'm made to do this. Fred insists that I do this disclaimer because I'll get off the podium and he'll say to me, those people think I'm that guy. Well, he's not that guy. So any faults that you hear from here will be, since he's sober, that I can tell you about. The other thing is that, I forgot what the other thing is. Oh, well, it's important. Oh, yeah, I know what the other thing is. The other thing is I want to tell you before I start, I never think to talk about him. It's usually about my recovery, my drinking, and my past first life. I call it my first life. But, he does treat me like a princess, for those people who were here yesterday and heard him speak. He does. And it is a joke sometimes, but overall, that's what I'm treated as. And that is a part of my story. He's a part of my story. There's priorities here that you're going to hear about. And I call him a byproduct of my relationship with God and my relationship in AA. But he is all the things that he appeared to be from this podium yesterday and more. He's a gentleman, and he's made amends to everybody in his life, and he's a good guy. And I needed to say that before I started, so I didn't forget. Okay? Now about me. Well, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, an only child of two addicts. One was a periodic alcoholic, and the other was a pill-addicted, Dexedrine, drinking alcoholic addict. And it was very inconsistent. That's about all I can say about my life. They were nice people. I look back on my life with my ex-husband and my kids, and I think about some of the horrible things that went on. And they're really not so horrible, because when my daughter tells me we didn't have such a bad childhood, I think, well, maybe we did do something better or nicer. But, I grew up in a house where there wasn't a lot of consistency. And I got angry very early. I can remember that was my first life. Stupid, boring, and glum. Okay, that describes it absolutely perfectly. I had no knowledge of any life, how to live life. I was bored to death. I never was happy, and I was depressed and angry most of the time. And I remember that first anger, and I thought about that yesterday when I was thinking about speaking. I remember that first anger was at my mother, and it was about a hat that she made me wear. And I don't know if there's anybody in this room that's old enough to remember, but we used to have the elastic bands under the hats they put on our heads. And I remember sitting in the back of a car with my mother and father going someplace and hating this hat and being enraged because she made me put this hat back on. And I found out later there was more. There was more to that anger about her and my life when I got sober, and I had to look at that kind of thing. And I just grew up. My father was inconsistent. He would drink, and then he'd get sober for a period of time, then he'd fall down in the living room and embarrass me. And I failed to be able to bring kids home because I never knew what was going on in the household. So it was like there was a lot of mess in my head, you know. And there were no brothers and sisters to talk about, nobody to fight with, nobody to envy. And we lived in a neighborhood in Brooklyn where you had very rich people on one side of you and a more poor class of people on the other side, and then a very poor class of people down the road. So it was like I didn't feel any connection to anything. I know today what that's about, but I didn't know at the time. So those are the kinds of things that I was feeling as a kid. And I remember the first drink very clearly. It was on my graduation from grade school, and I picked up the drink from somebody, or somebody gave it to me, or I don't know how I got it in my hand. But I remember the feeling. I remember the feeling very well. It's okay. Oh, you know. And that kind of stuck here. And it wasn't to be used right away. I got into my first romance that summer, and it was like lovely, and somebody loved me, you know. It was always about outside of me. You know, make it better. If I didn't feel good about it, I walked away from it, and if you validated me, I stuck around. And it was always about something from the outside coming in, making me feel better. And I remember that summer, it was glorious, you know. It was the boy, you know, and the alcohol, and all of that wonderful, wonderful stuff that was to follow me together for the rest of the time, you know. They always went together, the boy and the alcohol. Anyway, nothing too significant went on. I went to Catholic school, and they threw me out because I was behavioral. And I went to public school, and I drank. I picked up alcohol. I took it in my room. I drank it by myself. I don't think that's social drinking. I've never considered myself a social drinker. I'd steal my father's booze and put it in some orange juice or ginger ale or something and go in the room and whack down a few and then go out to meet my friends who didn't drink. And then, of course, it'd be hide the breath, you know. So I had to move on, you know, to the next thing because I couldn't drink and hang out with these people and maintain an average in school. So I quit school, walked away. I didn't like it. I didn't want to be there. I didn't feel good about it. So I left it, and that was to be a pattern. Also, the other part of my MO was that I gave you everything to do for me. My mother spoiled me, of course, because they were making up for all of their sins of omission and commission, right? She'd iron my clothes, and I'd have nothing to worry about. So that was another pattern that I got into, where you got all the power and you got all the responsibility. And I didn't have to worry about anything. And so I went on my merry way to New York, and I got a job in Lower Manhattan, and I worked in a bank, and I found the drinkers. And I wandered through that era of my life in a brownout, because I have very little recollection of anything that went on. And then I went on to get married. That's what we did. We worked a little bit, and then we got married. And Mr. Wonderful and I met in the bar, and we were going to ride off into his mother's beer cake together, you know, and it was just great. I married into an alcoholic family. They drank all the weekends away, and she loved me. I loved her. We hit a case of beer every weekend, and he was in the service, and he rode off to Germany waving goodbye to me, saying, "I'm going to send for you, honey." And the first time I saw Europe was about 5 years ago. So, you know where that little marriage started off and ended, huh? I don't have to go into the gory details about that. And he came home. His mother and I split another case of beer one night and decided that we'd get him out of the service, which he never forgave me for. And he came home and he went to work in his job that he left when he went into the Army. And we began to have our children. And we have 2 boys and a girl. My oldest son is 3 years older than the middle one. And then I had one 11 months later, and then I quit. And we just drank, you know. It was like that was what you did. Weekends were made for partying. We went to the mother-in-law's every weekend with the kids, and we drank. You know, went to the beach, we drank. We went to the movies, we drank. We drank. He and I drank, you know. But my drinking was a lot more obvious than his drinking, and that was to start a pattern of problems. And I'm not going to go into a long drinking history here because I'd rather talk about my second life because that's more important. Now, there's a couple of things you got to know about me. First of all, I was very, very much into church when I was a kid. I used to go by the church, even when I was drinking in New York, and I'd come home like sometimes at 5 o'clock when I was supposed to. I'd stop in the church and I'd kneel down. And I could never understand why God didn't give me the things I asked for. I mean, I remember as a young girl, little girl, asking for, you know, a bicycle and a dog, and, you know, then it was a boyfriend, and then it was, you know, then it was happiness, and nothing ever seemed to come together for me. I never seemed to feel as if there was any future. I would bop into these situations, like, you know, like getting married, you know, quitting school, and I would bop into these situations, and they never seemed to be satisfactory. They never seemed to work out the way I thought they might work out. If I even thought they might work out, I don't know. I don't remember thinking much in those days. All I did was kind of drink when it got tough. So we set up this life. The first apartment was a cold water flat, I guess you want to call it. I don't know. I had to shovel coal. That's all I know. Now, you got to understand, Fred came from Paterson, from a poor family. I didn't come from Paterson, and I came from Brooklyn and like that upper middle class part, you know. So we didn't do that deal, whatever you said before. We didn't do that. How are you? You know, we talk very properly. And so you put this little lady that never took responsibility for anything, and you throw her in an apartment where she's got to shovel coal to stay warm. Well, father goes off to school to get some kind of degree. He was always off doing some degree of something. And I froze the first winter we was there. Right? So we had 3 years in that place. We moved into a better place. We bought a house. You know, we did the deal. We did the socioeconomic deal. His jobs got better. He got more salary. We moved forward. There was a couple of problems there. He was pathologically frugal, so I didn't see a lot of that money. All right, and he wasn't home a lot. Whatever he was out doing, I was to find out later, there were a lot of things he was out doing. He was out doing school. He was out doing drinking. He was out doing other things. And but I held it together. You know, I didn't drink every day. I quit the pattern of daily drinking at this point, and I kind of settled down to weekend drinking and kind of making the responsibilities. So I did the Cub Scout routine with the kids and Cub Scout den mother and vice president of the PTA and all that stuff you're supposed to do. And I spent a lot of time making sure it worked. The house was immaculate. I had people saying it was the cleanest house I've ever been in, you know, because I was drunk off my ass 24 hours later, you know. But it was important to me to keep it together because, see, if you didn't keep it together, if you didn't keep that control, if you didn't keep that image, the clothes and the kids and the polished shoes and the polished floors and the immaculate exterior, you know, people would know there was a problem in the house and in here. And it was very important to me, growing up in that house of mine, with all of those fears that somebody was going to find out my father was a falling down drunk or my mother was crazy as a loon. You know, it was really important to me to keep it exterior perfect. And I spent a lot of time doing that. So my drinking was very controlled for a number of years. But that didn't mean when I drank it didn't create problems. And the problems got worse. We would go out drinking on a Saturday night and it would be a tear off the dress, you know, smack you around kind of fights going on. And because of me. It was always about me, Okay, I was the problem. My drinking was the problem because my overt behavior was very obvious. And so it was the tearing of the dress, or there was a cutting of the hair at one point. There was a lot of stuff that went on to try to control, but it was always about my drinking, never about his. And so we ended up in counseling. I guess it was around 1960, I don't know, 60 sometime. And he went for a while. I wouldn't go together because the controls were so bad at this point in the house. I mean, his controls about money and everything was so horrible that I was afraid to go to counseling with him. So he went to one counselor and I went to the other. He quit, I stayed. And she was terrific. She put me right in group with somebody who had a drinking problem, you know. She knew right away what the deal was here. And she just nurtured me right into the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous. Right? And what happened was we had a mutual friend. We had a friend that had alcoholism and sobriety, you know, once in a while, one of each. And he'd have all these big barbecues, and he'd invite all his drinking friends and all his AA friends. So I got exposed to Alcoholics Anonymous through these parties. And I'd ask for pamphlets, you know, and I'd take them home, put the glass of beer next to my nightstand, read the pamphlets. And but there was always the gentleman. And I got to bring this up. You know, I talk about this because it's important. I always looked to the outside for everything I needed, okay, for all the validation I needed. And, of course, that took the form of guys. I mean, let's face it, that's where it's going to go. And there was always that illusion. I always had this escape mechanism in my head. And I don't talk about this a lot, but I lived in a marriage where it was very important that I control everything, because if I didn't, I'd have to look at what was going on. And if I looked at what was going on, then I would have to do something about it. And I didn't have the skills or the emotional stability to do what I had to do, okay? And I didn't know that. I mean, I look back and know that now, but that's what was going on. And I see women that I work with doing that. I see them, well, I can't go here because if I go here, well, I won't be home to make the dinner. I used to be like that. I had to be where I was supposed to be. I had to do what I was supposed to do. Because if I didn't do that, something might happen there, and I wouldn't be there to control it. So I got a lot of Al-Anon in me, too. I told her yesterday we're more alike than we're different. And I had to deal with that. I had to deal with that in my sobriety, my codependency issues. So anyway, I forgot what I was saying about him. Always about him. He wasn't home a lot. And anyway, so I went into this counseling, and there was always a guy in here. That's what I was talking about. There was always a guy in here. I always had something I was looking at that was like an illusion that I could carry around, that was a sort of an escape for me. And I don't even know if you understand that, but that was the way I operated. And so, but, you know, sometimes when you got it in here, you got to manifest it out there, you know, and that was a little bit of a problem at times. But anyway, there was a guy, a recovering alcoholic guy in this group of people. And he took a liking to me, or saw my problem, and was going to be my savior, right? Now, I don't want to make this sound bad, because it wasn't bad. Because I would never have followed a woman into Alcoholics Anonymous, I can tell you now, okay? And God knows exactly what he's doing all the time. So came this man, came those meetings, came where they were, came those pamphlets, came this therapist who's guiding me in group to look at my drinking problem, by being able to explain it to somebody else, what alcoholism is about. It was great knowing what it was about. And so all of these things came together, okay? They all kind of fell together. And I found out where the meetings were, and I had two things that happened to me that summer in 1970 that were the catalyst to bring me into AA. And that was how it happened. I embarrassed myself at a picnic in front of my daughter. We went into the bathroom. I was drinking from 9 o'clock in the morning with the guys. I didn't drink with the ladies. You know, I didn't do coffee and donuts with the ladies. I did with the guys, you know, the beer. And I'm drinking very early in the morning. It's a very hot July day. I walk into this cubicle, slide the thing over, and fall down. And I can't get up. And everything in here is clear. It's clear. To this day, I can remember it. And I'm lying on the floor, and I know this is just a repetition of my life with my father, and my life with my mother-in-law who couldn't hold her alcohol. And it was just horrible. And she's outside, and she's yelling, please have somebody come and help me with my mother. And I'm lying there, and I can't move. I'm so drunk, I can't move, but I'm not out to lunch here. The second thing is I got behind the wheel of a car. I found myself at my brother-in-law's and sister-in-law's one day in the summertime with the kids, and I knew he was on vacation. I knew he'd be drinking, so I made the day, went up to the house, and started drinking with him in the afternoon. My husband called from the station and said he needed a ride. I got in the car and drove. I have no recollection of driving from their house to the station. I got up at the station, and I kind of came to. I don't know how I got there. And he said to me, you're drunk. And I said, whoa, good observation, right? We have to do something about your problem. And I said, no, I'll take care of it. Now, I knew where the meetings were. I knew where the people were. I knew where Mr. Wonderful was. So I was going to go to the meetings, okay? I don't remember the time frame days, what it amounted to. But anyway, I ended up in the Cleanest Group on a Tuesday night, walking in the meeting. Well, first of all, I walked around the building 5 times because my kids went to school there, the Catholic school. So I was terrified somebody's going to see me go in there. I finally got to the top of the stairs, and he was standing down at the bottom of the stairs. And I went down the stairs, and he said, welcome, we've been waiting for you. Well, that was it. You know, I'm now arrived in AA, you know, here I am. We've been waiting for you. And, you know, I have these things in my head. I don't look like an alcoholic. I don't act like an alcoholic all the time, you know. I do all these great things, you know. I'm not fat. My face isn't bloated. I'm not blown up like a balloon, you know. I don't fall down a lot. And I'm too young. I walk in the room, and there's this girl doing a second step meeting, and she's like 10 years my junior, so I thought, well, that's over. I'm not too young. And I got in the room, and I stayed. I didn't really stay for Mr. Wonderful, right? I stayed for something else. I heard a doctor speak a few years ago at Rutgers, and he talked about if you open up the head of a cancer patient and you look inside, you can see the disease in the brain. But the disease of an alcoholic centers in the mind, but it's nothing visible. And that the one common denominator that we have is that we never relate to another human being while we're out there. Okay? We never can connect. We never feel grounded, or we never feel like there's any attachment anywhere. And that when we walk into the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous, we see something going on there. That people are connecting, and they're together, and they're making some kind of a connection. And it's not a conscious thing with us. That's why we hear so many people say, I walked into the room and I felt like there was something going on there, and I wanted to belong. Well, that's what it's about. It's about that ability to finally make a connection with somebody else. And identified with that, because that was my life. My life was all in isolation. I didn't connect with anyone. I had no feelings for anyone, although I appeared to, okay? I would do anything in the world you asked me to do if there was a payer for me. I didn't think so. I thought it was wonderful. I would do everything for you. But as long as I knew that I could call you when I needed you to mind my kids or do whatever. So there was never any connection with me. I never connected in that house. I never connected in that marriage. And unfortunately, till now, until I got sober, I really don't know if I connected to my kids. I just couldn't make it, you know. I didn't have any siblings. I didn't have anybody to worry about that I had to please. I was an isolated human being. That's the way I felt. And when I walked into AA, they wanted me there. You know, even if my thinking, my perception was they wanted me there for something else, whatever somebody was interested. And I saw something going on with those people that I had never experienced before. So I hung around. I definitely hung around. Now, you got to understand that the era that I come from in AA, we did a lot of meetings, okay? We went to open speakers meetings. We booked our commitments 3 months in advance. That kept me sober many, many times because I didn't accept this right away. I wasn't about to grab this thing and run with it the minute I got it, okay? I still had a reservation and a bottle in my peripheral vision when I walked in the doors of those meetings. That somewhere, somehow, if things got tough enough for me and life got too exhausting, I had a lot of years I could have drank. Okay, that was my thinking. So there was this bottle of vodka over here all the while, dancing in my peripheral vision. So I went in, and we did a lot of things in those days. I mean, we washed cups. We didn't throw them away. Forget that. That was not. We cut the cake. We washed the floors. We picked up that's why Fred and I joined the Netcom Group, because they were doing that stuff. They'd wash the floors. I hadn't seen anybody wash a floor in an AA meeting in years. But we washed the floors. We cleaned the place. We painted the church basements. We went out on commitments with 3-4 cars. I mean, you book a commitment with your group, and there was 3-4 cars of people went with you and supported you. We just clung together, you know. There was a funeral, everybody went. There was a party, everybody went. And, you know, you understand now, I got this guy living home here that isn't buying this package at all. He's going to handle my drinking problem, right? And I'm off doing my deal in AA, you know. And he's not liking it very much. So it was just a fellowship, you know. There was open speaker meeting, and there was your closed meeting, and you were at those meetings every week. That was your group, and what your group did, you did with them, and that's the AA I grew up in. Now, there wasn't a lot of other stuff going on here, okay? There was a lot of fellowship, but there was a lot getting through. I mean, I was going to step meetings every Tuesday night, and nothing was penetrating here, because when you got this little baby over here, you know, kind of shimmering, so things got tough. My husband came home one night and he said, I got transferred. We can go to Kansas City or New Jersey. I said, well, I can't go to Kansas City with this dude, that's for sure. Not in Kansas City. So we'll go to Jersey. So Jersey we went to. Now, we had a great relationship. By now it was almost non-existent, right? And he drew a circle around the map in New Jersey. And he said, well, you can pick anywhere here. I don't care. We'll move anywhere. So I'm still in my good alcoholic thinking, right? So I picked the most northwest corner up here in Sparta, New Jersey, which is rural America in 1970. Now, you got to understand, I grew up, born and raised in Brooklyn. You could have a telephone booth on every corner, you know. You could buy a paper at 2 o'clock in the morning and go for an ice cream cone anytime you wanted to. And I moved myself, my 3 kids, a cat, a dog, a bird, a bad marriage, and one car, which he took to work every morning, to rural America, okay? I'm talking about no streetlights, no sidewalks, no telephone booths. You couldn't go out on the street past 9 o'clock and find anything open, okay? And here I am in this house with these kids and this cat, dog, and bird, no car, and I'm crazy as alone. I mean, I am losing it. I've left that home group. I've left all those great people back there. My sponsor was a fabulous woman. The man that Fred did his 4th step with, Jack, that he talked about last night, or 5th step, was his wife, my sponsor. She was a beat the book. Don't drink, go to meetings when you want to, when you don't want to, you know. But the thing she told me is never say no in AA. Never. If anybody in AA asks you to do anything, always say yes. And here I am up in rural America, dying, okay? I don't know what I'm doing. And my choice, of course, my alcoholic choice. Well, he said, you don't have to go to those meetings up here anymore, right? Because after all, you know, you did that in Brooklyn. And I don't want those books on the table anymore. Get those books off the table. And we don't need any AA people visiting us. We got people in the area here we're going to have little wine and cheese parties with, you know, so we don't need the AA books laid on the table. And the whole life, you know, it was just one big drinking community up there. The first party we went to, I asked the lady for soda, and she said, what? Nobody. I mean, there was like 7 alcoholics in you know, and there were 5 meetings. 6 meetings? You went to Newton on Sunday night. You went to Sparta on Monday night. You went to Newton on Tuesday night. You went to Dover out of town if you wanted to travel on Wednesday night. You went to Alina Lodge, which was run by a very staunch woman, on Thursday night, back to Newton on Friday night, and you stayed home on Saturday night. And that was the meeting. So the same people all the time. And nobody up there was patting me on the head saying, oh, you poor dear. You moved from Brooklyn. Oh, we feel sorry for you. You know, they were saying, get out a book. You know, get out a step book. Why read the third step? Take an inventory, you know? And I'm taking this book. And I grew up on the 12 and 12, not the big book. And I'm reading this 12, and I'm looking at this third step, and I'm looking. You put the key in the lock, and you turn it ever so slightly, and the door will open of itself. What key? What door? And even though self-will will slam it shut again, it will always respond once you pick up the key of willingness. Could you explain this to me, I'd say to somebody? Just keep reading the book. Just keep reading the book. But you got to explain this to me. No, just keep reading the book. Finally, some lady got a hold of me up there, and she slapped a name in my hand, and she said, "Go talk to this person." I mean, I was bouncing from rage to depression to gloom. I mean, I was a mess. All the feelings and emotions, all the validation needs, there was nobody up there patting me on the head. There was nothing I could reach out to from the outside to pull in to give me what I needed. It was horrible. I really don't know. It was the willingness to stay in AA that kept me sober. That's the only thing that I can look back and say. It was, and God's grace, which I wasn't even in touch with because I had gone through that church thing, and when I was drinking, I was so ashamed of some of my behavior that I said, "Stop going to Mass." So, I was listening to God in the meetings, and I was grasping that concept. But, the spiritual life is not a theory. It tells us in our book. The spiritual life is not a theory. It has to be lived. There was no action on my part. I couldn't act because I didn't know how to act. I don't know where I was when they taught life, but I sure now wasn't there. And so it crashed. The whole thing crashed. And this bottle is getting further and further and further in front of me. And I'm in a place one night with a bunch of people that I don't belong with, and they're drinking, and some dude orders me a bullshot plain. What the heck that is, I never heard of it again. And this waiter brings, you didn't make the announcement this morning, but the cell phone. The waiter brings the drink in, and it's got vodka in it, and I take a sip of this thing, and I say, "Wow." There we go again. Oh. And the first thing that comes in my mind is, I didn't order this. Nobody will know. Well, that was it. That was my life. I didn't order this. Nobody will know. You don't have to tell me what to do because I can get by it. And the second thing that came into my mind was, God will know. I put the drink down, and I walked out of there. Okay, I excused myself, and I walked out of that place, and I went home, and I called my sponsor in Brooklyn, and she said, "You put the coin I gave you in your hand, and you go up to the Newton Group, and you tell them what happened." And that was the beginning of my second life. From that point on, there was never a time that I had a viable option to pick up a drink, ever. If I had gotten through all of that crazies and all of that nutsies, in that house up there alone, with no car, with no telephone. He had put a lock on my phone, and I could do this. Okay, I could do this. And I started to hear things at meetings. I took the name of that guy that she gave me, and I went to see that pastor, that church. And I was later to find out he was doing his thesis for his PhD, and I was his subject. But I spent a lot of time with him. I spent a lot of time with him talking and unpeeling that onion. I couldn't write. I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't put anything. I put liabilities down on a piece of paper, and I didn't know what an asset was. I didn't have a clue what was okay about me, because all I could deal with was all of that crap I did while I was drinking, and that nice girls don't act like this. And so it started to happen, okay? It started to happen. My spiritual awakening is of an educational variety. There is no burning bush. There is no big hullabaloo, okay? It's of an educational variety and has never stopped. It has continued. I went to that guy. I talked to him. In the meantime, I met Fred. I was still married. I worked for him in the real estate office. That was a trip. I got to tell you, a trip. I asked him to come to my second anniversary in Newton, or I don't know, third anniversary, whatever, and he showed up there. He thought he was going to sell real estate there or something. I don't know what. We had a bar in that room. It was a pyramid club up in Newton, and they had a big mahogany bar. And he's sitting down. He tells this about looking down one way, looking down the other way. All these people are happy, you know. He's up there with his real estate cards in his pocket, you know. All these broken marriages, he's going to get some business. And we went our separate ways for a while, you know. He went off and had to get his life squared away, and I had to do some deal with my life. I had amends to make, and I had work to do. And my husband and I, my first husband, went on a marriage encounter. And if you ever want to know if your marriage is good or bad, go on a marriage encounter. You'll know right away. And we came back, and I knew. And I knew that I was going to have to stop scrubbing the floors and stop making it all okay on the outside and start to look at what was going on the inside. And I did. I started to look at me. I went into that counselor, and I told him my marriage was on the rocks. He said, "Why are you here?" Not for my thinking, of course, you know, if my marriage was on the rocks. Everything was outside, you know. And so I left him 5 years later, and my marriage was still on the rocks, but I was okay. And I did all the stuff I was supposed to do. And I started to hear the things in AA I was supposed to hear when I was supposed to hear them. I started to hear that honesty was not stealing, okay? Honesty was something that I had to do. When I walked into a garage and heard myself screaming at my kids with all that rage and anger that I had carried around, and I had to work on that. That was honesty. That was looking at that horrible part of myself. Honesty was looking at the books and reading the books and seeing that I had dependency needs, that I let everybody take care of me, and that I was a manipulator and a conniver, and that I wasn't a people pleaser. Everything I did had a purpose, that I could get a payoff for it. And I don't want to see that. I don't want to see that selfishness and self-centeredness are 100 forms of self-delusion. All right? We step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate, sometimes without provocation. But invariably we know that we've done something to cause that. I didn't want to read that in the big book. I didn't want to see that. I didn't want to own that. Are you kidding? What's it going to do? What's it going to do if you took all that rage out of me? What's it going to do? What was going to be there? A hole in the donut. Okay, what am I going to be? I can't be this. There's nothing there. And I remember leaving those counseling sessions, doing those fourth and fifth steps, vigorously, trying to be vigorously honest, rigorously honest, and thinking, I'm going to be nothing. What am I going to do? And so it came to be, you know. It came to be. First it was the fourth and fifth step, and then it was kind of sliding over 6 and 7, which I had to pay for a little bit later on. Going right back into the amends and doing what I had to do, and, you know, finally saying one day, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep this up anymore. I love you guys, you know, but the beer kegs were coming in the house for the kids, and, you know, the parties were starting, and everybody was drinking. I couldn't do this anymore. So I took me and half the silverware, and I left. I left him the house. I left him all. If I hadn't left him the house, he would have died. He would not have known what to do. So he got it. He got it all. He got everything. He went out and bought new furniture for the kids, took the lock off the phone. You know, he used to sell cars out from under me when I first got sober. I'd go on my car and be gone in the morning because he didn't want me to go to meetings. I had AA people coming in and put little jacks on my phone wires in the cellar so I could rig up a phone so I could use it. Because the operator was calling saying, we can't take any more of those click calls anymore. You can't do that anymore. You know, that crazy stuff went on. I had no checkbook. I had no money. Everything was about a control. And I gave him that power. So it wasn't his fault. It really wasn't. He was who he is. He is who he is. But... you know, I just couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't live like that anymore. There was other things out there. I was working, waiting tables because he wouldn't give me money to go to school, and I went back to school. I applied for nursing, and I didn't get in the first year, so I went to college. I had to wait tables to buy my books. Fred will tell you he paid for my tires for my car, you know. And I don't know, just did it. Just put one foot in front of the other and did it, you know. My life my second life, and I call it that, was happy, joyous, and free. From the time that bottle went out of my peripheral vision, and I started to begin to put my own foot forward. Not your foot forward, my foot. To not care so much anymore. I'm going to tell a story. It just came to mind. I went to nursing school. We graduated. I mean, it was like I never graduated. All the things that I never did when I was younger, I did in sobriety. I got a beautiful wedding. We had a beautiful wedding. I went to school. I graduated from nursing school. All those things that I missed along the way. See, God didn't leave me when I stopped going to church to ask Him. And He didn't give me all those things that I thought I needed and wanted in those years. He didn't do that. He waited. He waited till I put the effort in, till I put the spiritual theory into action. That's when He started to give me those things. He gave me a graduation. He gave me a relationship. He gave me a career. He gave me a profession. He gave me all. All I did was get up every day and do what I was supposed to do the next day. And when I was able to let go of all of the guilt and remorse and anger and resentment and all of that stuff that I carried around all my life, not just from my drinking, okay? The stuff that got compounded from my drinking maybe, but not the stuff that was there. When I started to let go of that and not let you hurt my feelings anymore, or not look to you for the answer that how I had to act, or not look for that guy to fill that void, or that fur coat, or that whatever it was, the next house, the next party, the next whatever. When I started to let go of that and started to pull in the things that I could do, I started to have serenity. And I'm sitting in a meeting one night, and I hear this guy say, you're doing God's will when you have serenity. I want to kill him, Where were you for all those years that I didn't understand that? I wanted to shake him, because I was like chaotic, When I took the booze away, it was chaos. Okay, so I go to school, and I graduate. And this is a story I want to tell you just to show that we always have to work on this stuff. I'm in nursing school, and we have to go take the state boards. And I'm not a good student, okay? And I'm in school with a bunch of girls that are a heck of a lot younger than me, and I'm trying to keep up. I'm not an A student for any reason. And I study. I can read, So I'm in this hotel with all these girls, and we're down in Atlantic City going to take the state boards, and I'm studying. Well, this girl's making fun of me, okay? Woman I spent a lot of time with while we were going to school. And she's making fun of me, and she's jabbing in front of these women. And I'm raging. So we go take the state boards, and I'm like raging at her. And I'm not raging anymore, see. I'm in AA, and I'm sober a good amount of time here. And I'm not raging. And I'm not comfortable with that raging. I've learned that, No such thing as justified anger. I've been there, done that. And I'm like, I can't let go of this. And I'm really... So I went for a jugular. I actually did, verbally. And I'm in the bathroom in this diner on the way home, and I'm saying to this friend of mine, why am I doing that to her? Why am I doing that? I can't figure it out. So I get home. I was still married at the time. And I get home, and I was running. I was running. And I got the sneakers on, and I go out, and I'm running. Still got this rage. And I sit under a tree at the lake, and I'm sitting there, and it suddenly hit me, That's the way I felt as a kid. When you would make fun of me or do something to me to hurt my feelings, even if it was my perception of you, you might not even be doing anything. It was my perception of you. That all my life, all of these feelings were my perception. Not my mother, my father, but my perception. That she just triggered off that feeling in me. And that was my thread through my whole life. I anticipated the fear that I was going to get that feeling. And that's what I carried around. And it was the thread that ran through all my relationships. It ran through everything that I ever did and wouldn't do or try. And that was it. And that's the gifts, okay? That's the gifts that I've gotten from AA. To have that kind of a spiritual awakening of an educational variety. And I know Bill W. did have a profound spiritual awakening, but I truly believe that he just learned as he went along. He suffered the same things we suffer. The depression, the anger, the rage, the discontent, irritable discontent. All of that I can identify. That's not going to be there today. I don't allow that. I can't let you I cannot allow you to do that to me, nor can I allow myself to get that way. And when I get that way, and there are situations that come up. I just had a situation recently that really blew me away. There was a girl I was working with, and she blew me away. And I had to get into my head. It took a while. What's going on here? What is this thing going on here that I'm reacting so violently to this 1 year sober nutcase, I had to say, she was doing that to me, that misunderstanding, Anyway, my kids are great. My daughter has just had a baby. She doesn't have the lifestyle that I grew up in, but she's a great kid. I love her. She's great, and that baby's great. It's what do we call it? A biological miracle? I don't know what we call it. My oldest son is married. He has 2 children. They're just delightful children. There's alcoholism in that house. Codependency. Oh, God, does she need Al-Anon? Oh, God. My middle son was the prodigal child. And he would get drunk and leave and come back and go to the Marines, get kicked out, all of that deal. And he disappeared for 3.5 years, a few years ago. And it was terrible. It was, who talked about it? Somebody here the other day. It was horrible. It was like, I just had to let go of him. I didn't know whether I was going to get a call that he was alive or coming home. That was the way I lived. But I got down on my knees many years ago with him in the 80s and when he got out of the Marines, and I turned him over to God. I said, would you please take this job, because I kind of made a mess of this situation, and I'm sorry about that, but I can't change that. But he's really yours. And if you just take him back to yourself and protect him. And he came home last March, a year ago in March. And he was going to go back to Seattle. He came over to check on us, I guess. I don't know what he was drinking. And we all did it, Bye-bye, we love you, but it isn't going to happen. And everybody stayed on the same page. And we didn't even do it on purpose. Even my ex-husband. Everybody just said, this is enough. We've had enough of you. You left for 3.5 years. You didn't care. We had babies and got married and got new jobs and moved. So, we're not going to put up with your nonsense. So I said, make a plan. Don't make me crazy. Make a plan. So he made a plan. I'll go back to Seattle and pick up with the hooker I was seeing. And we're right off in the sunset together. And, I say, here's a ticket, But if you use the other part of it, come home to treatment or sell it, because I don't want to know. And 6 days later, he was on our machine. Get me a bed. I'm coming home. And he's been in AA ever since. And he's just devoted to the program. We're doing a project to try to save. We were trying to save the big book, where the big book was written, 17 William Street. I have a group of people that I put together 6 years ago. And we can't work the building, but the guy is going to give us an opportunity to put a memorial in the building when they renovate it. It's a mess. It's gutted. And he's working with us, and he's going to let us. And actually, the president of that group just walked in here. Curry just came in the door. But anyway, my son is involved in that group. And so he's doing his thing. And he's good. And that's God's work, not mine. So I guess that's where I'll end it. I think what I really wanted to say to you today was that my life is the action of spirituality here in AA. It has to be. It has to be. It's God, AA, together, and then the relationship, the job, the profession, the goodies, all the stuff that goes with it. It can't come from the outside. And the only way I know how to fill that hole and that detachment up is to have a relationship with God. So today there is no anger, resentment, depression allowed, okay? It's a matter of working, just going and saying that simple prayer. Please remove this insanity from me and help me to get out of this chaos. And I'm going to end with reading you something, okay, from a letter that was written in 1950 by Bill Wilson. And I don't know who it was to. It's called, Is Happiness the Goal? I don't think happiness or unhappiness is the point. How do we meet the problems we face? How do we best learn from them and transmit what we have learned to others, if they would have the knowledge? In my view, we of this world are pupils in a great school of life. It is intended that we try to grow and that we try to help our fellow travelers to grow in the kind of love that makes no demands. In short, we try to move toward the image and likeness of God as we understand Him. When pain comes, we are expected to learn from it willingly and help others to learn. When happiness comes, we accept it as a gift and we thank God for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. That's great. If you want a tape or CD of Pat's talk or any other great speakers that we had here this weekend, see Terry. And see Terry early. Many of you have heard this. If you order tapes and CDs early enough, he's not going to be here late on Sunday. That's kind of one of the goals we've asked. Get him out here on decent time. Remember the 2 o'clock workshop? You've got the schedule here, and if you are interested between the sessions of seeing things going around, great town you've come to. So if you're from out of town and you need some direction on things to do, and you're going to go down and see the charters boats coming in, and that's something we've always enjoyed this time of the year. There's people that just raise your hand if you can help people get around here. A lot of the locals you see in committee members and stuff. So just ask, and we'll help you get to those places. If there's nothing else, we'll close with the Lord's Prayer.